Your Highness, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special occasion and dinner with our esteemed guests from Qatar, Her Highness Sheikha Mozah bint Nasser Al Misnad. By lending her presence, Her Highness does us great honor, and we anticipate her remarks this evening with considerable interest. Her Highness enables us to begin with great distinction tomorrow's inaugural conference of the Kelly Day Endowment on the Status of Women and Human Rights in the Middle East, on the theme of Women in the Middle East, a Contemporary Assessment. Thank you, Your Highness, very much. I would like also to say a special thanks to the people here tonight who have made the Kelly Day Endowment on the Status of Women and Human Rights possible. Of course, I would like to start by thanking Mr. and Mrs. Robert Day for their generous support of the program and the other founding members of this endowment that are in our company tonight, Paula and Sam Douglas, Eva and Mark Stern, as well as Secretary and Susan Baker. In addition to these individuals, we are pleased to have many special friends of Robert and Kelly Day here this evening who have contributed their resources and time to this endowment, including Ghada Irani, Leo Daly, Arnold and Ann Coppelson, Susan Orsini, and Candy Spelling. It is also my pleasure to recognize and thank this evening's dinner sponsor, ConocoPhillips and Jim Mulva, as well as Baker Botts, tomorrow's luncheon sponsor. I would like to offer a warm welcome to our conference participants. We are lucky to be hosting some of the world's most respected experts in women's and human rights for tomorrow's proceedings, and we look forward to them sharing their insights with us. Further, I am delighted to report that the Baker Institute and the Qatar Foundation, under the leadership of Her Highness, have embarked on an important discussion of areas of cooperation between our two organizations on key public policy issues. I had the honor of meeting with Her Highness and her staff in Doha recently, and this morning we followed up on these meetings with members of her distinguished delegation, Dr. Mohammed Fatih Saud and Dr. Hatem Karanshawi, to define how we can move forward. We made excellent progress this morning in these discussions. This year, we received a very generous grant from Qatar to work together on public policy issues involving international embryonic stem cell research and a conference we will have on this subject in Doha. We deeply appreciate this support. As well, we will be working together on energy issues and are also planning an energy conference in Doha in the near future. There are a number of other areas of potential collaboration that we are also exploring, which, in my opinion, hold great promise, and that we hope to make public after our deliberations. As you can tell, and if there is anything I have learned from Her Highness, it is that the work ethic is not an American monopoly. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce the Honorary Chair of the Baker Institute, James A. Baker III.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, before introducing our distinguished speaker and special guest, let me express my thanks to Kelly and Robert Day for their vision and their dedication to this important new research program here at the Institute. As Ed Dirigian has said, tomorrow's inaugural conference on the status of women and human rights in the Middle East has been made possible by their support and the support of many other special guests here tonight. From our inception, we at the Baker Institute have depended upon the generosity and the enthusiasm of our benefactors. In our 14-year history, we have rarely seen a benefactor more dedicated to the purpose of our research than Kelly Day has been, and we owe her and Robert an immense debt of gratitude for the establishment of this endowment, and we are celebrating that establishment here this evening. Tonight's speaker and our special guest come from a country, Qatar, with which the Institute enjoys a special relationship, as Ed has just outlined to you. Whether we're talking about global energy trends or stem cell research, we have been able to look to Qatar for partners in programs to advance human knowledge and to raise public awareness. But the Baker Institute's close association with Qatar also reflects the deepening relationship between our two countries. The reason for this development, I think, are quite simple. First of all, Qatar is a staunch strategic partner of the United States of America. Washington can depend on Doha as an ally in efforts to combat terrorism and to broker stability in the Gulf. This support, let me stress, transcends mere rhetoric. Qatar hosts vital United States military facilities that directly support brave American servicemen and women that are serving today in Iraq. Secondly, Qatar is becoming an increasingly important actor in global energy markets. Already a major world supplier of natural gas, Qatar stands poised to play an even more critical role thanks to an ambitious expansion program marked by innovative collaboration with international energy companies, many of whom are represented here in this audience this evening. And last, but certainly not least, Qatar stands as a model of reform in the Gulf and indeed as a model of reform in the entire Middle East. Over the last decade, Qatar's Emir, His Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, has moved to open his country's political process, relax restrictions on the press, and expand economic opportunity for all of Qatar's citizens. It is here that our speaker has played a truly decisive role, spearheading her nation's efforts to improve education, to strengthen families, and to protect children. As chairperson of the Qatar Foundation for Education, Science, and Community Development, she has overseen the creation of Education City, a true university of the future, which features path-breaking partnerships with international educational institutions, scientific research centers, and think tanks. Here, as elsewhere, Qatar looks to the future, and our speaker leads the way. Her influence, let me add, reaches far beyond Qatar. In 2003, UNESCO named her Special Envoy for Basic and Higher Education. The same year, she established the International Fund for Higher Education in Iraq. In 2005, she was selected as a member of the United Nations high-level group of the Alliance of Civilizations, a body created to combat extremism. In short, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker is a recognized international leader in educational and social development, and she is an acknowledged expert on finding common crucial ground between modern and traditional conceptions of women's roles in the family and in the community. We are extremely honored by her presence here tonight. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor, privilege, and pleasure to introduce Her Highness Sheikha Mozah bin Nasser Al Misned. Your Highness.
Thank you. Highness Farmaki. Thank you. Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be here this evening. But I have to make a confession. Over the past few years, I have often been asked to engage in public discussions on women's status in the Middle East. And I have usually, politely refused. I have done so because I strongly believe that separating women's status from the larger issues of the region is so loaded with political history and so burdened with misconceptions that has become a counterproductive methodology. The debate over women in the Middle East often frames women in a timeless battle against oppressive traditions and religions of the region. It ignores the larger socio-political realities. This debate swings dangerously between two poles: patronage and abolitism. The first group follows the line of colonial feminism in the hope of enlightening the women of the Middle East. They perceive an endless battle between women's liberation and religion. They hope we'll come to our senses and reach the same rights and freedoms as they have, only guaranteed, of course, by secularism. On the other side of the debate, there is a growing branch of radicalism that denies problems with women's issue in the region, and claims that a return to their version of Islam is all that is needed to guarantee women's rights. This view feeds on a mistrust that the women's movement has been co-opted for other political objectives, just as democratization has been co-opted, that women's rights have become a cover for a secularist agenda to annihilate our identity and our religion. I believe it is time to demagnetize these two poles. In fact, we should not frame these debates as a battle between secularism and radicalism. Rather, we need to deframe the debate. We must put it in context, where the discussion focuses on how we can guarantee human rights across the board. Ladies and gentlemen, the human rights problems throughout the region have been well documented. In fact, the entire world is facing serious deficits in human rights, particularly since September 11 and the ensuing war on terror. Gross human rights violations are being carried out in the name of democracy and security. So, it is within this context we can discuss women as members of larger community undergoing tremendous violations of their rights, both by their governments and foreign occupiers. Their rights to education, their rights to economic opportunities, to political participation. Let us take a few examples. We start with education. Some of the conclusions of the most recent Arab Human Development Report puzzled me. The report noted that 98.8% of those surveyed in the region, including men, said women have the same right to education as men. While the report does mention that there are vast discrepancies in literacy rate, it offered no viable explanations for these differences. And in contradiction with its own public values survey, the report concluded that the gender gap in education is the result of discrimination against women. We should not merely accept the stereotype that this gap is caused by timeless patriarchal traditions, especially when the voices of our people and similar patterns in other regions claim that it's not so. Scholars need to call for more in-depth studies that innovatively analyzes the real causes behind this gender gap in education. Scholars also need to highlight the problematics. How can we talk seriously about literacy rate in a region much of which is ravaged by war, corruption, and poverty, where the education of its citizens is secondary to the protection of its oil fields? In Lebanon, Iraq, and Palestine, where civilian buildings, including schools, have been intentionally targeted, educators murdered, and the basic necessities of education embargoed. Ladies and gentlemen, we also need to deframe the approach taken to the economic gender gap of the region. The Middle East has a long tradition of female entrepreneurs. There is ample historical evidence to show that women were active in the market even before Islam. And this was later taken for granted in the Quran, which sets forward details about work ethics, how transactions can be carried out, and how to divide wealth. However, it never once mentions that women should be confined to only certain positions or places at work. Today, many women in our region are involved in the regeneration of NGOs, foundations, trusts, which have historically existed in the form of al-awqaf. In fact, there has been a 19% increase in women's share in economic activity since 1990, and over 25% of private businesses in some of the Gulf countries are owned by women. Still, there are gender gaps. There are gender gaps in economic participation. In many Gulf countries, for example, education attainment of women is much higher than their economic participation. But interestingly, the Global Gender Gap Index, published by World Economic Forum in 2006, notes that contrasting patterns of either educational or economic gender gap is not unique to the Gulf or the Arab countries. Certainly, our region is divided economically, and we have various problems. High among them is the incompatibility between education and market demands for men and women. We also face high rates of youth unemployment in some countries, economies that are not sustainable, overdependence on foreign labor, unequal distribution of wealth, and over-regulated economies. Again, scholars need to stop blaming the economic gender gap on Islam and conduct both regional and international comparative analysis. And again, we need to learn our own lessons and not measure women's societal contribution only by her workplace participation. We need to creatively develop new indicators that value women's work in the home and innovative policies that allow the home to become a place where income is generated. We need to offer choices that can accommodate women's beliefs and lives. Choices that encourage women to celebrate their femininity rather than suppress it in a business suit. Choices that liberate women to set their own priorities, that balance their needs as women and mothers. Such choices have allowed highly educated women to pause their careers in order to provide a quality family environment while fulfilling the dreams of another. Ladies and gentlemen, please bear with me for one more example to support my plea for a deframe research agenda. Political participation. I cannot understand how women's political participation can be discussed as if it is divorced from the political realities of the region. A region where the few control the many, where basic political rights such as freedom of speech, the right to assemble, to form associations, are still either non-existent or newly born. How can we, in all sincerity, talk about women's political participation in parliament that are farcical, where women are often tokens of progress without any real power? Where women have become a political commodity, an indicator of progression or regression, used for the cynical objectives of gaining or granting approval to certain regimes. The truth is, there is nothing in our religion to prevent women's political participation. Women are excluded for the same reasons men are excluded. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening I'm appealing to you to discard the old frames we have used to define the issues. These very frames have been the cause of oppressive misinformation. I'm not calling for reframing, but a deframing of women's issue. Scholars have made incredible progress at deconstructing Western patriarchal discourse. I appeal to them to apply this same vigor to deconstructing both the harmful legacy of colonial feminism and the rhetoric of religious radicalism. This requires a critical rereading and reconstruction of women's history in the Middle East, and an honest curiosity of the present, a deframing of contemporary gender agenda. I make special appeal to researchers to reconsider the status of women of the Arabian Peninsula, have often been made invisible in the official historical records of the region. The spirits of our grandmothers are evident in the reawakening of women who are taking on leadership role throughout the region. For example, the high education attainment of Arabian Gulf women today reflects the assiduous spirit of assertion and commitment inherited from the heroines of the past. Reclaiming the tradition, or reclaiming this tradition, is an integral part of deframing the study of women in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, let me leave you with this thought. We need to position Muslim women not as objects, but as subjects of the past and subjects of the present. Let us dare deframe the Orientalist paintings in which we have been framed. Thank you very much.